Hey, it's Joe. Let's go back to one of the most infamous events in American history, the Salem witch trials of 1692. We've all heard the stories, innocent people accused of witchcraft, paranoia sweeping through a small Puritan town, and tragic executions. But what if these so-called witches weren't practicing dark magic at all? What if they were just misunderstood? People who were using or exhibiting abilities we'd now recognize as forms of ESP or extrasensory perception. To understand this, we have to look at the cultural and religious context of the time. In 17th century Salem, the Puritans had a strict worldview. Everything was black and white, good versus evil, godly versus demonic. Anything that couldn't be explained within the framework of their religious beliefs was immediately viewed with suspicion. This was the time when fear of the unknown ran rampant, and anything that seemed unnatural or beyond the ordinary was attributed to the work of the devil. Now imagine someone in that environment who had an intuitive gift. Maybe they could sense when something was about to happen, or they could know things about people without being told. Today we might recognize this as clairvoyance, precognition, or clairsentience, but back then these abilities would have been terrifying, as they easily misconstrued them as witchcraft. The idea of ESP didn't exist. Any sort of psychic ability was seen as unnatural, and by their logic, if it wasn't of God, it must be of the devil. In Salem, many of the accusations of witchcraft started when people, often young girls, began exhibiting unusual behavior. They would claim to see visions, feel physical sensations, like pinching or choking, that had no visible source, or fall into fits. But what if these were not symptoms of possession, but signs of a heightened sensitivity to the energy around them? We now know that people with psychic abilities or heightened intuition can often experience overwhelming physical sensations when they pick up on strong emotions or energy from others. Could it be that these girls were simply overwhelmed by the collective anxiety of the town, or by the energy they were subconsciously absorbing? And what about the witches themselves, the ones accused of casting spells or causing harm? Many of them were older women, or people on the fringes of society, who didn't quite fit into the rigid norms of Puritan life. These were people who may have had a deeper connection to the natural world, a stronger sense of intuition, or even knowledge of healing through herbs and plants. Today we might consider them empaths, healers, or those with psychic sensitivity. Let's consider the possibility that many of the accused weren't casting spells, but instead were tapped into abilities like telepathy, clairvoyance, or even precognitive dreams. Imagine being able to sense that something bad was going to happen, like a crop failing, livestock dying, or someone falling ill, without any logical explanation. In a small, superstitious town like Salem, this kind of knowledge would immediately raise suspicion. How could someone know something was going to happen unless they had made it happen? To the fearful townspeople, this kind of foresight was evidence for witchcraft. And then there's the idea of telepathy, the ability to read or sense the thoughts and emotions of others. If someone in Salem could pick up on another person's thoughts or unspoken fears, it could easily have been seen as a form of manipulation or mind control. In a world where telepathic abilities weren't understood, the idea that someone could know too much would have been terrifying. We also have to consider that many of the accused witches were likely women with strong intuitive abilities, living in a time when women were expected to remain silent, obedient, and submissive. Any woman who demonstrated intelligence, independence, or spiritual insight was seen as a threat. If a woman spoke out about her intuitions, or was known to have uncanny knowledge of future events or hidden truths, she could easily be labeled a witch. The very idea that women could possess such knowledge or power went against puritanical worldview, which equated spiritual authority with male dominance. And it wasn't just women, men were also accused, often those who didn't conform to societal norms or who had knowledge that couldn't easily be explained. Whether it was the result of strong intuition or the ability to sense energy, or even a natural talent for understanding human behavior, these people were labeled as witches simply because their abilities couldn't be explained by the rigid religious structure of the time. Another thing that's tragic about the Salem witch trials is that many of the people were just misunderstood. They weren't practicing dark magic or engaging in sinister rituals. They were simply tapping into abilities that are much more common than people realize. Today we recognize psychic phenomena, extrasensory perception, and heightened intuition as natural, albeit mysterious, aspects of human consciousness. But in Salem, these abilities were feared and seen as evidence of a pact with the devil. The witch trials themselves can be seen as a manifestation of collective fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of anything that doesn't fit into the accepted norms, and the fear of people who are different. And in this case, the people who were different were those with a natural connection to energies, to emotions, and to the subtle undercurrents of life, things we now associate with psychic abilities. So when we look back at the Salem witch trials through the lens of ESP and intuition, it becomes clear that many of those who were accused weren't witches at all. They were simply people with gifts that were misunderstood and feared. In today's world, these abilities are becoming more recognized, even if they're still not fully understood. But in Salem, the fear of the unknown led to tragedy. The witch hunts weren't just a persecution of witches. They were a persecution of those who had the courage or misfortune to tap into abilities that society wasn't ready to accept. In the end, it serves as a reminder of how fear and ignorance can turn natural human abilities into something to be feared. The lessons of Salem aren't just historical, they're relevant today as we continue to explore the boundaries of human consciousness and the hidden potential within us all. Humanfluence, out.